Minister Hutchins was appointed Victoria's Minister for Education just in June of this year, and before entering Parliament, Natalie served as Senior Advisor to former Premier Steve Bracks and Chief of Staff to the Minister for Education, Mary Delahunty. She also ran a small business specialising in research and communications, and Natalie was the first woman elected as Assistant Secretary of the Victorian Trades Hall Council. Natalie's parents moved from high-rise public housing in the inner city to the western suburbs to give their children a better life, and this has given Natalie a passion for the opportunities she can help bring about in Melbourne's west. This is what prompted her to run for Parliament, and she was represented the seat of Sydenham since 2014. So welcome, Minister. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sharon. And hello, everyone. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, Wurundjeri, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and acknowledge that you're all on different lands today, and welcome any Aboriginal people that are joining us. My apologies for having to be in the car, but I've just done a press conference with the Premier about education, which we got to announce some fantastic commitments that I'm going to give Parents Victoria's e-conference the scoop on. Straight from the conference, which was a commitment of $1.6 billion if we're re-elected to commit that into public education. 850 million of that is in upgrades to schools, to current schools across 89 schools across Victoria, and 25% of that 89 are in regional Victoria. And also a $25 million commitment around the planning of the remaining 25 schools that we've committed to in the package of 100 new schools. We've got 75 that are currently either being delivered or land being purchased and plans in place, but 25 more that we've identified in the last budget where we committed to purchasing land. Now there is 25 million to do the planning of those 25 schools, and also to look at how to get utilities connected to some of those sites, because in the main they're in greenfield areas, and there needs to be some substantial work done there. So it's pretty exciting announcement. And that $1.6 billion also contains a $19 million commitment around teacher retention and recruitment, and a range of packages for us to be able to work with schools to try and attract back some of those teachers that have left the sector. A target of 400, trying to bring 400 teachers back, but also a recruitment process of placing with incentives 400 teachers into regional and rural Victoria, and in subjects that are hard to attract as well. And on top of that is a part of that package is around assisting principals with recruitment of teachers from overseas as well. So it's a pretty comprehensive package that we think, because there's no silver bullet when it comes to workforce shortages. Unfortunately, we're up against it as an entire state and nation, not just in the education sector, but across the board. So it's really making sure that we are meeting and having in place a school system that's going to meet the demands of the next 10 years, which includes, we estimate, around 100,000 new students coming into the system. And that's going to mean standing up those new schools in time, but also making sure our current schools are delivering the best education that we can in the best classrooms that we can, because you can't deliver a first-rate education in a second-rate classroom, as many people would know. I've got to acknowledge also a few other people that are on the line. Of course, Gail, thank you for inviting me along today, and it was great to see you the other night at the Excellence Awards, and John Hendry, who's here as well. Thank you, John, for all your commitment in 50 years plus. You don't look that old, by the way, John, to education, and to all the board members of Parents Victoria and the keynote speakers that are also joining you today. I can't kick off any in-depth discussion without acknowledging what's happened with the floods across Victoria. It's just been dreadful. We've just had so many schools affected, so many communities affected. And I want to reassure you all that whether it's ensuring that buildings are safe for students and kids and staff to return, but also we want to make sure that we're putting in place the emotional wellbeing that we know these families are going to need and be supported. And I was able to announce last week that no VCE student would be disadvantaged that was in a region that was affected by floods. We are standing up alternative sites for exams to continue, but of course, many of those VCE students may not have had electricity, may not have access to a permanent place to be staying, might have moved around, and of course that's going to have a huge effect on their capacity. So they'll have the ability to apply for a derived score regardless whether they sit the exam or not. We're trying to encourage them to sit the exams if they can, but also they have that capacity to do that because we know that it's been a really tough time and is a severe crisis in many of our country towns that have been affected, and even in the Maribyrnong area where 350 homes were flooded and a lot of people displaced. So my thoughts are with them, with all the parents out there that are trying to juggle. I can't imagine how hard it is for them to be worrying about, where they're going to live, because with floods, it's not just a matter of a quick clean up and move back in because of the substantial issues that unfortunately are connected with flooding, with mold and debris and a whole range of other illnesses that can come about through a flood. So I'm happy to take questions when we get to the end of this if there's any specifics around that. But I'm pleased to say since Friday we had around 84 schools closed. Today it's more like around about 15. So we're seeing schools reopen and some normality coming back. But there are a number of schools that are going to have some severe work done on them and are not going to be open for quite a while. So as a parent and as a politician, I'm pretty happy to be here today to talk about your conference theme, life in relation to the key quality education relationships. I know that there's been a lot of lobbying done, particularly by Gail, around wellbeing in schools and the need for us to have better connections between our school leadership and our parents. And I've got to say, in the short time I've been minister, I've been to around about 60 schools now, and you can see the difference where parents are engaged in a school. The difference in the school is very apparent and particularly noticeable at a secondary level when parents are engaged, and noticeable when they're not engaged. So a relationships-based education philosophy is something I know that you're championing. It's something I'm very keen to support and look at ways in the future that we can work together better. I told Gail when we met when I was in this capacity, of course I've met her before, but as the new minister, that my mum was actually the secretary of the Parents Club at my primary school, and was very proudly connected to the school. And I think it made for a much better experience for me and my brothers throughout our education, to have a parent that was very hands-on in the school community. And I'm not sure that we have that level of buy-in at all of our schools anymore. Of course, there is some really good buy-in at some schools, but others where we find difficulties in making sure parents feel comfortable to connect, particularly if they're from different backgrounds and culturally they don't know how to engage, or they feel that they're not able to engage due to language or cultural barriers. And I think that's something we've got to continue to work on. Whether it's about packing lunches, giving pep talks, preparing uniforms, I know that parents are very committed to their kids' education, And there are a lot of parents out there that want to be more engaged. I had my youngest complete year 12 through the pandemic last year, year 12, year before year 11, and I know that it's a hard slog. I've had one of my stepdaughters in previous years suffer really severe anxiety through primary school to the point that she was having quite severe nightmares about spelling bees. So we had to introduce meditation as a part of our nightly routine to try and calm that down. I'm happy to say now she's a successful teacher. So there's the peaks and troughs and roundabouts that you go through as a parent. And I think it's the love and care and commitment that parents give their kids that truly make them successful. And I really believe that if a kid is not happy, if we don't have kids at school that feel safe and happy, they're never going to succeed. They're never going to thrive. We can throw every literacy support at them, but if that and numeracy support, but if we have kids that don't feel safe and happy at school, then that is a severe problem for our sector. So that's something I'm very committed to continuing to deliver. And I want to say a huge thanks to Parents Victoria for your commitment. It's a great role that you play and something that I hugely value. And I know you work really closely and particularly worked very closely during the pandemic with our department in giving feedback, in working in collaboration, in telling us things that we probably weren't aware of that we needed to be aware of as a department. And I want to thank you for your commitment and being forthright in putting forward parents' views. And I also appreciate the work to educate parents about respectful communication. It's still an ongoing challenge that I see, and it's one of the things I hear pretty much daily when I visit schools from teachers, being a challenge in returning after COVID and dealing with some unwanted behaviours that weren't there before, both in kids but in parents. And I think I'm getting lots of positive feedback, particularly to primary school level, about respectful relationships, but I'm also getting a lot of feedback around how that needs to extend into the family home in some pockets. And quite frankly, when schools do put on forums to engage parents around having that discussion about respectful relationships, quite often they're getting those parents involved that potentially already are very understanding of the values, and it's the parents that possibly need to be engaged that aren't engaging, and there's a lot of schools out there seeking help in how to do that better. And I feel it's a really important part, particularly of our work, particularly post-COVID, to make sure that we are taking that extra step, and we want to explore ways with Parents Victoria that we can do that to deliver some of the foundations of respectful relationships out to parents. And I see that there's been a few case examples that have worked. Ocean Grove Primary School ran a workshop for parents, and they focused in on trust and forgiveness and integrity, hope and compassion. And not only are they fantastic values, they're probably values some of my political colleagues could learn from as well. But I heard that this was a very good and successful program that has run out, and maybe something we could look at replicating across some other primary schools that would want to participate. Also, I know Paran High School, who I know are going to be featured today, have a philosophy that learning works best when there's a true partnership between home and school. And I think that's a really important message for us to get out. And look, from the other end of it, I've heard also many secondary school parents tell me that they don't feel that there's a role for them to engage in their secondary schools as their kids get older, that there's avenues when they're in year 7, but as they get older, there's not a lot of avenues, and I've heard that loud and clear. Of course, all of us here I know, share the belief that mental health and wellbeing is so important to academic learning, and the mental health support that we've been able to provide is a first in Australia. The $200 million Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund is already making a huge difference in rural and regional schools, and I've been really pleased to see that in action at a few schools, doing Smiling Minds and watching kids connect in new ways, and to be able to really use their skills for enacting mindfulness has been just wonderful. I was also privileged to sit in on some art therapy with two young boys who had been in out of home care at some art therapy at their primary school, where the teacher had actually been in a preschool setting with the same boys, had completed some further education herself and moved into the primary school sector. And I've got to say, the continuity of her being able to see the same kids really showed that we need to step up that connection work that we have between our preschools and our childcare centres and our primary schools, when there's kids with trauma-based backgrounds that have that real need to be able to continue doing different therapies and having some consistency with specialists. So that was really, really interesting to hear, and I'm sure there's lots of other examples people have on the call. We're also investing $200 million to expand the mental health in primary schools programs to 1,800 government and low-fee non-government schools to catch emerging mental health challenges early and give them the support that they need. There's a lot of challenges out there in this prevention space, but also for those kids that need additional support, making sure we identify that as early as possible and get them the help that they need. We're also expanding the Navigator program to increase support for young people, both the current arrangements of 12 to 17, but also having a pilot program for younger students. We've invested $37 million to be able to roll that out at that 10 and 11-year-old age range, in order to see if we can help prevent kids from disengaging. And I know that is a big concern for a lot of parents, a lot of teachers, a lot of schools out there post-COVID, particularly those kids that during the lockdown years transition from primary school to secondary school. And this is a program I know that will help target that. But of course, there's more work that needs to be done. We're also continuing to support the Active Schools program and the Positive Start program as well. And also, of course, I was really pleased about 6 weeks ago to be able to announce the continuation of the Tutor Learning Initiative into the next year. And I think that's making the world a difference in our schools. And that has seen the employment of around 6,500 tutors across our state. And finally, of course, our Breakfast Clubs program hit the huge milestone of its 25th million meal being consumed just 2 months ago. And we're continuing to see fantastic partnership work being done through our breakfast programs. Food Bank also doing a fantastic job right now in rolling out some additional services, food services in our flood affected areas as well. And they've done an absolutely amazing job. Our teachers, our parent volunteers that do that work in regional settings that have been affected by floods. So thanks for having me at the conference. I think, Gail, there's probably a lot more, and Sharon, a lot more questions that people have for me, and I'm happy to take those now. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, Natalie. That was really good. Some very interesting points there. Looking forward to reading the full announcement from this morning. Thanks for giving us a little heads up about that preview now. I think you're very much correct about parents not being able to engage as well in their schools post-COVID as they perhaps did before. And I think we really need to look at why schools are putting up barriers in a lot of cases, sometimes physically, lock gates to keep parents off site because, you know, as you say, we need to work together. And the challenging behaviours, I think we often need to look at what has led to parents getting to that point where they do exhibit those behaviours, and that's part of what the relationships-based education that we're talking about today is all about. So great to hear that you're interested in replicating that across schools in Victoria, because we're certainly keen to do that. So we will have further discussions about that, I'm sure. Now, everybody, you have the opportunity to ask the Minister any questions that you would like. Just pop them into the Q&A box, please, not the chat. And Gail is going to monitor those and she will put them to the Minister. So Gail, do we have something there at the moment?
We certainly do, Sharon. So just bear with me as I just throw to the Minister the first question, which comes from Nina Latalia from Vic SRC. Minister Hutchins, the investment into mental health has been well received and Victoria students are thankful for it. Given the topic today is relationships in education and the connection to supporting mental health, if re-elected, what are your commitments around prioritising relationships in schools between families, schools and students?
Well, thanks for that question. Obviously, our big focus has been around filling the void in the workforce that we've currently got in our schools. That's where our focus has been, and certainly around our announcements today. But look, I'm absolutely committed to continuing to work with Parents Vic on how we roll out programs that look, I don't want to preempt, but it could be an extension program to the respectful relationships program. It could be some engagement forums that are proactive, but it's certainly something we're willing to work on with you going forward. I don't have a financial commitment to announce today, but certainly I think we can continue to put forward some budget bits together into the future.
Sorry, Gail, you're muted.
Thanks, Sharon. Minister Hutchins, given the discussions around respectful relationships between family schools, will a re-elected Labor government fund family engagement officers, especially to disadvantaged and at-risk community schools?
Well, I know that this has been a big ask from Parents Vic. It's certainly something I'm interested in exploring. It may not be a commitment we can make this side of the election, but it's certainly something I'd be happy to continue to lobby for into future budgets. I think with what's going on in schools at the moment in terms of still recovering from COVID, we do have a big task ahead of us in 2023 to improve that parent engagement with some support from the department. There's no doubt about that. I think, quite frankly, term 3 and 4 have been really challenging with having people still affected by either COVID or flu or mental burnout in our school system. So we need to make sure that we've got those settings right into the new year, and then really embark on something with you. But yeah, of course, happy to continue to work together. And I think respectful relationships is one of the platforms we can use to do that.
Thanks. The next one comes, it's about the Doctors in Schools program. Will it be expanded to primary schools?
There's not a plan to do that as yet. Our big focus has been about mental health and well-being, but that could be something of the future. Our biggest issue in rolling it out in secondary schools has been getting access to the workforce, and that still remains a challenge and would be part of the barrier of us being able to roll it out in primary schools. But certainly, you know, as we watch the Smile Squad and the dental vans unfold across our system and how they're picking up so many kids in need, and as well as our state school relief program around eye testing and that rolling out as well. I mean, I was really shocked to hear that 23% of kids tested through that program need glasses, which is a massive jump than before COVID, which is kind of reflective of more screen time. There is a possibility down the track that we look at this, and I'm happy to continue to work on it. I'm yet to see all of the positions filled in the secondary system, just due to, I don't know if people have noticed, but it's pretty hard to get in to see a GP. It's hard to engage one in our school systems. We've done pretty well so far, but I think we still have some vacancies.
I think it's just as a follow-up to that, just for a little bit further background on that. If the program was even extended to year 5, rural communities have really greatly received where it has happened, that program, particularly when they don't have a resident doctor. So yeah, they're really appreciative of that funding, and that has had a big tick from those rural communities that have been successful to make that work. So we just wanted you to be aware that there has been asks around that.
Okay.
We've got another one from Ross. It's about the Navigator program. It's expressing there's a wait time around 7 months, and to be eligible, the student has to have about 30% attendance, which is extremely low. What is needed is an early intervention and support. We need to know what is happening for the family so supports can be put in place. Is there a way of putting school attendance on the agenda and getting experts outside of education, i.e. family therapy, to explore the best ways to address school refusal?
Look, yeah, I think this is an issue we do need to revisit through a post-COVID lens. I think the commitments we've made to date are quite significant in cost commitments. But certainly, do we have the best system in place post-COVID? And am I still on? Can you still hear me, Gail? Yeah, sorry.
Yes,
my internet connection's looking a bit dodgy. So look, happy to keep talking about how we can improve Navigator and how we can extend it. We have gone down the pathway in other parts of government of looking at multi-systemic family therapy around families that have had numerous contacts with government over various issues, whether it be family violence or contact with the justice system. Most of those families, and we've got a trial of around 200 families. This is being run by DFFH. 200 families, many of them have school-aged kids. So we're going to look at the results of that program. It's called Better Connected program, and see what a difference that's making in a whole range of measures, but school attendance is one of those.
Great. Another one, this is actually around, because of our great work in relationship-based education, and we see another part to our work is around relationship reparation, but of course in schools, commonly known as restorative justice. So the question is, as Minister, how do you see restorative practice being supported in schools going forward?
Look, I might have to take that one on notice, Gail. I have a whole lot of opinions around the positive nature of this, because I've seen it in practice in the youth justice system, and it's fabulous. And I've seen it in various different ethnic communities where they've adopted this for some mechanisms to move forward where relationships are breaking down across particular family groups or ethnic groups, and it's so successful in place, but it does require quite a substantial investment. But I think it is something worth us looking at and getting some costings on.
Thank you. We've got one around the Tutor Learning Initiative, and understanding that funding has been secured in 2023. If there was a change of government so obviously there's a bit of sort of anxiety if there was a change of government, and I know you can't crystal ball that outcome. So I suppose I think it's just so long term. If you were, if a Labor government was returned, what do you see beyond 2023?
Oh, look, I've got to say, I've got big shoes to fill with James Molino leaving and me stepping into this role, but I've been, very vocal about continuing that work into 2023, and I can tell everyone here that I'll continue to be vocal about it beyond that, but I can't make a commitment right now here today into the future. But look, I think the results are going to speak for themselves, and we're going to be able to keep some sort of program running, whether it's at the capacity that it currently is of 6,500 tutors. I'm not sure, but I think, you know, the work that they're doing is absolutely fantastic. I can also, when I talk to the tutors themselves, the level of work satisfaction is really high, because they say they're seeing results very quickly, and that, you know, makes them feel more engaged and want to stay in these roles. So, look, I can't make a commitment beyond what the budget already allows me to. Otherwise, I'd be in trouble with the Treasurer, but I'm very keen on doing what I can to keep this program in place.
Nellie, now throwing to
I might have to leave it there, Gail, because I've got to
Okay.
get on the road to Shepparton, and every time the car moves, the link drops out.
Could we just throw squeeze one more in about teachers? It's a very quick one, and then we'll finish up, and that'll be spot on. And thank you for doing this, because, you know, trying to do this from the car, etc. Considering FISO states that wellbeing is integral to student learning, and by extension, teacher wellbeing is integral to delivering it in student wellbeing, what plans or programs are being investigated to improve and support teacher wellbeing and reduce non-core teaching workload?
Well, I think the biggest commitment we've made so far is through the EBA, and that's for an additional hour starting 2023 out of the classroom for every teacher, and then in 2024 the hour and a half out of the classroom. That's almost an $8 million commitment just there, and it requires us to recruit just to backfill that 1,900 teachers, but it's something we're committed to. Of course, that's just a little tip of what I recognise as some of the challenges of wellbeing with our teachers. But of course, retention and wellbeing is absolutely key to us, because we can't afford to lose more teachers from the system. So certainly we've been working with our principal class on how they can be monitoring and engaging in better ways their teachers' wellbeing. And some schools have picked that up tremendously. Others are going to need some more support and a bit more of a push around that. But, you know, it's just really important that we have our principal leadership groups connecting on a regular basis with our teachers and checking in on their wellbeing, promoting different supports that they can put in place. And I don't just mean a call system, I mean proactive prevention work. So there are programs available, and it's making sure that they're happening in those schools. So it's something I'm very conscious of.
Thank you, Minister, and safe journey to Shepparton. And we much appreciate your candid approach and your personal and authentic answers. So thank you for participating today.
No worries. Thank you, Gail. Thanks, Sharon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Minister.